just last meeting. I do. Got my my note. You want to say something? Okay, colleagues, if you could take your seats, we can make a start. Good morning, colleagues. Welcome to this meeting of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. Item 1, apologies. We have a full house. Councillor David Jones will be joining us later, so a full complement. No apologies received. Item 2, Chair's announcements and urgent business. Just one item to mention this morning, and that was the shocking fire that we saw in town centre Bolton just 2 weeks ago today at the Cube student accommodation. I think when we all probably saw the pictures that night, we immediately saw echoes of what happened at Grenfell Tower. I just wanted to put on record my sincere thanks to all colleagues at Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service for the exemplary way in which they attended to the fire and the professionalism of the response. I think it was a miracle actually that nobody was hurt or worse. And actually praise is also due to the students themselves, who think organised themselves well and looked after each other and made sure that the building was clear. But it is worth saying that the fire service had undertaken some of their own learning exercises from Grenfell ahead of the public inquiry, and had particularly looked at the question of command with regard to the fire command, but alongside that evacuation command. And that extra focus on evacuation, I think, played a big part in the successful and professional management of what was a very alarming situation on the night. The response from Bolton University, I think, was also outstanding in the way that they looked after their students on the night and in the days afterwards. And I'm sure maybe Councillor Greenhouse may want to say something about that, as well, of course, as Bolton Council, who I know David was on scene, and the Chief Executive on the night in question, and the leadership there was obvious from the start. Of course, though, this also raises issues around building safety, and particularly buildings with cladding. And I think by no means is this an issue that is yet in the right place. I think we all owe a debt of thanks to Mayor Paul Bennett for the work he's done on the high-rise task force in Greater Manchester. And as part of that work, this building had received a visit, although it doesn't technically meet the definition of high-rise. But I think because of that work, we were in a better position to respond. But I wonder whether Mayor Bennett wants to say anything on this wider issue of cladding beyond the ACM cladding that there's been some focus on, and also the question of whether the high-rise definition is adequate, because it may mean that there are many more buildings in all of our boroughs that have not been on the radar but probably should be on our radar. Mayor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor Burnham. And like yourself, I'd like to thank the firefighters, the officers, the emergency services, Bolton Council, the university, also the student ambassadors, Kate and Jude, who literally ran around the building knocking on people's doors, encouraging them to evacuate. And also I'd like to thank the general public and community organisations that have literally supported those students and their families since the fire in Bolton. I mean, I think we've done an excellent job, and as you rightly highlighted as well, there was some learning from Grenfell. We operated 2 command units on the night, one to deal with the evacuation from the building and the other to deal with the fire, and the students registered at that block were found within 24 hours, which is a real testimony to our fire and rescue service here in Greater Manchester. Just to give colleagues a quick update on what's happened. So the cube was inspected by the Fire and Rescue Service in 2017, and we deduced that it didn't have aluminium composite material on it. GMFRS then requested a fire risk assessment was reviewed, and obviously that included the materials used on the external wall system of the block. And the assessment was shared with the Fire and Rescue Service, and that was in 2018, works undertaken on both the buildings as well. What's happening now is an investigation into the cause of the fire, and we'll also be exploring what role the materials played in the development and spread of the fire on the cube. So that's underway at the moment, and obviously we'll be reporting that as soon as we possibly can. These things inevitably take time, and they're often quite complex. In terms of the work of the high-rise task force, I thank you for raising that point, because, you know, since Grenfell nearly 2.5 years ago now, you know, we've had an independent review of the building regulations and the fire safety order, which has told us that that regulatory system is not fit for purpose. Government have consulted further. The consultation was called Building a Safer Future. Fire and Rescue Service have participated in that, and so has the high-rise task force. But where this ultimately brings us to is that the building regulatory system is currently not fit for purpose, and in a sense we have a national industrial crisis, in my opinion, when it comes to that system. For me, though, 2.5 years since Grenfell, I do think we have to question, is all of this receiving the urgency of response from the government? I think that is questionable. HPL testing, so high pressure laminate, which was on the cube, only started in April of this year. So we've got a long way to go here to look at all cladding systems, not just aluminium composite material. And then when you consider all of this work within a context of austerity and cuts, we know our fire and rescue service is facing £12.8 million worth of cuts over the next 3 years. Again, you've got to ask the question about, is the fire and rescue service up and down the country being prioritised here when it comes to central government funding? For me, though, we need to end this cladding lottery and make available at a national level a hardship fund to remove and replace non-compliant systems as a matter of urgency, irrespective of how high buildings are and irrespective of the cladding type. This isn't simply about aluminium composite material. And as you rightly highlighted, we need to seriously consider the 18-metre height threshold that's currently being used in a lot of the advice notes coming out of MHCLG at the moment. The high-rise task force is calling for a person-centric, risk-based approach to fire safety, which isn't determined by the height of a building. And we also know in Greater Manchester at the moment, our residents and leaseholders are facing life-changing bills. You know, I've had people contact me saying they've received bills for £40,000. They're unable to sell their properties. They feel trapped in their homes. So for me, I think moving forward, we all need to issue a joint statement, really, calling for the prioritisation of all of this work, and also a statement that asks for the inquiry to look at the government's response post-Grenfell. This is 2.5 years nearly since Grenfell has happened. At the moment in Greater Manchester, we have 80 buildings with interim measures still on them, and this saga still continues day in, day out for many people within this city region. There is a real urgency in terms of us moving forward, and I hope colleagues can join us in agreeing a joint statement from the combined authority to look at the government's response post-Grenfell and to really urge some urgency around all of this moving forward. Thank you, Mayor Burnham.
Thank you very much, Paul. Councillor Greenhalgh.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I will echo the words of Mayor Burnham and Mayor Bennett and just really paying tribute to to the fire service, who, as you said, myself and the Chief Executive and members of the Cabinet were down throughout the night until we got reassurance that the fire was contained. The sheer professionalism is just quite astounding, which we saw firsthand. But also, I must mention the other emergency services who were also there, the police, the ambulance services. You've mentioned the university, who were alongside us throughout, making sure that everyone was housed, as we were, because of course it wasn't only university students that were affected here. There were 2 adjoining property, well, not quite adjoining, thank goodness, but literally 5 metres away from the cube, that the fire service thankfully kept safe. But all those people were evacuated as well, and as part of the council's move, working along with the housing associations involved, making sure that those people as well were homed for the evening and safe. It's great relief, and I suppose quite incredible, really, that we aren't sat here today responding to a tragedy, because, and you mentioned the student ambassadors, and they were absolutely key, because they literally went from door to door knocking the other students up, who sadly, when they heard the fire alarm, many of them presumed it was just a false alarm. So I want to pay credit to everyone involved, including our community sector, who rallied and were on site constantly and were there to provide support, both in terms of not only the logistical, but also support for those that were affected, and scarred by the whole experience, which one can absolutely imagine was appropriate for everyone to do. I will comment on the building regulations, because clearly, for those of us that have been on site a number of times now, it is absolutely unacceptable that in this day and age we have building regulations that state that certain materials are uncombustible, and yet we are stood in front of that same base material that has literally melted and disappeared, and that was the walkways. There's an investigation that is taking place now. I don't want to preempt anything. I don't think it's appropriate that we do preempt it. We're clear, certainly, from our side in the council, and we have to. This was not a council building. This was a privately owned building. But in terms of building regulations, we had responded, and the building owners had responded to the upgrade that was required of them due to the legislation. So legislation, absolutely, in terms of building control, has to be looked at for the sake of all those people who find themselves in similar building. We aren't aware yet if the cladding failed, and that hopefully the investigation will show that. But it is not just about that. It is about linings. It is about insulation material that's used. There are a whole load of complex issues regarding the cube that it's important that this test investigation gets to the bottom of it, and then the government addresses, for the peace of mind of many thousands of hundreds of thousands of residents, for them to be able to sleep at night and have confidence in doing so. So it's long overdue, and I just hope that we can get on with this with absolute urgency. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, David. It was a terrible incident, but it also said something wonderful about Bolton, actually, in the way that all of the organisations you mentioned rallied round, and indeed the public. When I went to the university a couple of days later, the amount of stuff donated, clothes and food, fantastic to see. So that said something about your community, which I'm sure you already know, but I think really came through very visibly. I wonder whether Deputy Fire Chief would like to say anything, because obviously there's been very heavy praise heaped on, and rightly so, but I just wondered whether, Dawn, you'd like to respond.
Yeah, I would. I would just like to thank everybody for their kind comments, and I'll make sure that they are passed on to the firefighters and the officers that worked not only on that night, but continuing to work on the fire investigation, which, as has been rightly said, will take some time. And I would like to also echo what has been said about the need to stress to government the requirement to look at further issues around cladding and also the height of buildings. I think we've long said in our responses that this is not just limited to the high-rise, the nominal high-rise height. And so I would welcome any pressure that could be placed on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawn. So, thank you very much, colleagues, for those contributions. The proposal from Mayor Bennett is that we make a joint submission on the wider issues that are relevant here with relation to cladding and the height of buildings, just a much broader look at the range of issues, and I'm taking it that the CA is happy to do that. Thank you very much. So, colleagues, let's move on to item 2A, a slight change of mood, and I'd like to invite the leader of Rochdale Council. We're grateful to him and his team for hosting us today to tell us about Dippy on tour. Councillor Brett.
Who's got a copy, etc., and she'll now. Is it up on the?
It's up on the.
It's up on the screen. All right. Remember, this is a great coup for the Northwest. It's the only place in the Northwest Dippy's going to visit.
Okay, so welcome to the Borough of Rochdale, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk to you about Dippy on Tour Northwest. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for residents in Greater Manchester to visit the Natural History Museum's iconic Diplodocus. If you just think back to your childhood and things that you went to see, and which ones remain in your mind, which are still there in your memory, this is going to be that iconic moment for the children of the area. The Northwest children of today are going to remember this and pass it on to their children and their grandchildren. Dippy on Tour Northwest will be opening Rochdale to the public for 20 weeks from February the 10th. And the Natural History Museum tour is aimed at inspiring the next generation of scientists and making natural history more accessible to everybody. Here he is. This is the cast of a skeleton that was discovered in the United States. This is Dippy. For years, he was in the entrance hall of the Natural History Museum. It's the best-known exhibit they've ever had, and it was commissioned by Edward VII. And he's coming to us. So if you look at his journey, he's been in 8 different locations. And if you look at those locations, you will see that the majority of them are museums, art galleries, old buildings where old things are kept. And we may have a few dinosaurs in our Rochdale Council. I thought I'd get that in before anybody else did. Attack is the best form of defence. But our location at number 1 Riverside is the newest building that he's going to have been in. He's in Cardiff at the moment, and he's going on to Norwich, so we are the penultimate venue. We've got 5 million people within 1 hour's travelling distance of Dippy, and we're the only council building in the country to be hosting him. So if you look at our ambition, children will be inspired when they see Dippy in our building, and when they go further on to Touchstones, to the educational experience that we have there. Education mentions there science, technology, engineering and maths. I would like to think it's a STEAM as opposed to just a STEM, and add art in there, because the exhibition over in Touchstones is actually in our art gallery, and there will be many creative opportunities for children while Dippy is here. The environment, one of the things that we think is different about where Dippy is here is that our building has got all sorts of energy efficiencies and so on. So the environment and learning about protecting it and enjoying nature, this theme will be continued from this building into Touchstones, where I'll talk to you a little bit in a moment about what's going to be in the galleries there, about sustainability. The community aspect of it, obviously, we have 5 townships in Rochdale, and each township will be having different things that they're doing within the community. For example, we've got swamps in our parks that people are going to be contributing to. We've had a brilliant year this year for In Bloom, and that will be continued through those things. And the volunteering, I'll mention how many we have in a moment, but there'll be skills for people of all age and all backgrounds to gain in whilst DIP is here. So these are our ambitions and the legacy that we want to create for the North West. The impact, when he started off in Dorset, they had 150,000 visitors. And if you look at the figures there, you can see that the spend is tremendous, 2.25 million visitors spend. In Birmingham, there were 250,000. Rochdale's aiming for 300,000, because if it's increasing and increasing, remembering that this is the only venue in the North West, then, and we've got a 5 million population to draw from, we can easily get to 300,000 people. It's going to be a great show. Dippy is an absolute rock star. He's going to be here in Rochdale. I suppose we could call it Rockdale, couldn't we? So you meet Dippy in number 1 Riverside. And as you came into the building today, you might have noticed that we've got a rainbow banner, because the last fortnight has been our Rochdale in Rainbows, our Pride event. You might have also noticed there's a quilt down there for World AIDS Day on the 1st of December. So as you come into our building, you see a vast space. And in that vast space will be Dippy. He'll be based downstairs, obviously, and you'll be able to look at him from the balconies. You'll be able to look down on him. In the rooms either side, there'll be discovery labs and a sensory storytelling room. And there'll be a dino store where you can get your own little Dippy. Our partners in this venture are Link for Life, and they're hosting our family-friendly Dippy exhibition at Touchstones. It's 10 minutes walk away in the direction of the town hall. People will be led there by various things, and if you've got an app on your phone, dinosaurs will leap out at you from various places. The exhibition at Touchstones has a strong education focus, and it's mainly been funded through Heritage Lottery Fund. In Gallery 2 will be the dinosaurs. It'll focus on links with nature today, and there'll be lots of hands-on activities. You can see children on the floor there. There are going to be like dinosaur jigsaws. Dippy comes in 270 plus pieces. We haven't decided who's putting him together yet. No, really. They've put him together so many times, we're hoping it'll be absolutely seamless when he comes here. But the kids will be able to do that in those galleries. Gallery 3 will be a swampland to allow visitors to travel back in time to see what Rochdale was like 300 million years ago. And we have our own scorpion, which is actually 150 years older than Dippy, that was found 150 million years older than Dippy. He was found in Sparth Bottoms. So Rochdale 300 million years ago, and there'll be exhibits and augmented reality to bring that space to life. In the final gallery is the biodiversity and sustainability, where we'll have a swarm of bees. The community have been knitting these bees for the last year. I don't know how many we're up to, but it's literally in the hundreds, if not thousands. So our current position, we're the only location that's secured Heritage Lottery funding. We've already got 20,000 school children that are signed up, and we're expecting 35,000 to come as part of those school visits. In particular, we're extremely grateful for the support from TFGM, Manchester Airport and Marketing Manchester for helping us to promote Dippy on Tour North West. And if you notice the 4th bullet point, 150 staff volunteers and 100 community volunteers are already signed up, and community groups are already involved. So education and community programmes, as I said, it's in the hundreds, it's actually in the thousands. 1,700 knitted bees for the Dippy exhibition. There'll be family activities, there's events at both venues. Education and community are integral parts of our programme. We've got Dippy on the road going out in events already, and all our libraries are involved. I popped on the places that you're at, a little Dippy on tour bookmark so you can remember the dates. But we have a detailed communications plan which includes video, social media, online promotion. Watch out for Dippy on Tour on Twitter. We've got a programme of press and PR activity, and as you can see at the top there, TFGM will have a Dippy on Tour tram coming to a place near you to promote Dippy, as well as supporting adverts. Manchester Airport have already committed to promoting Dippy on the screens as you come through the airport from your destination. When you come from sunny Climbs, you'll come into sunny Rochdale for the tour in February. They'll all be on the screens there. So I hope you, if you haven't got a bookmark, I'll get you one, but that's hopefully what. What are our asks of GMCA? So first of all, come and visit us. Between the 10th of February and the 28th of June, be very welcome. Bring your friends, have an office party to come out to Dippy. Help promote and spread that message across your authorities with schools, and let's use Dippy on Tour to inspire the next generation of Greater Manchester scientists. We need your help to do this. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Emsley and Councillor Brett. Exciting stuff and a real coup for the borough. We noticed your joke there, Janet. I can assure you nobody in the CA was thinking about there being dinosaurs in Rochdale Town Hall. I note your asks, and I'm sure all colleagues have seen them as well, and I'm looking round and I can see that everybody is agreeing to support those asks. So we will do everything we can to hit the 300,000 target. I think it's a fantastic thing, and as I say, a real event in Greater Manchester. So well done to you all, and you will have our full support. Okay, colleagues, into the agenda proper. So item 3, declarations of interest to be completed. Item 4, minutes of GMCA meeting 25th of October. Are they approved? Q. Item 5, GM Transport Committee 8th of November to note. Item 6, minutes of the GMCA overview and scrutiny committees held in November, those being Economy, Business, Growth and Skills, 8th of November to note. Housing, Planning and Environment, 14th of November to note. And can I just say that you will see in those minutes a long discussion on electric vehicle charging, a very informed discussion actually by members of the Scrutiny Committee who were there that evening, and a very good exchange with Simon Warburton from Transport for Greater Manchester. We will go through some of the specific issues that the committee raised under the item, but I think it's important that the Scrutiny Committee system that we have is fully taken on board and informs our work, and we will come back to what the committee said under the item. Third overview and scrutiny was corporate issues and reform, 19th of November. Those are all to note, colleagues. Thank you. Item 7, GMCA Waste and Recycling Committee, 14th of November to note. Item 8, GM Local Enterprise Partnership Board, 11th of November, also to note. Item 9, GMCA appointments. Item 9A is the extension of the terms of office of the independent member of the Standards Committee and independent person for standards, and invite our GMCA monitoring officer, Liz Treacy, to speak to this.
Thank you. Just a very short report requesting an extension to the terms to April 2021. Nothing further to add. It's a straightforward matter, hopefully.
Thank you, Liz. Is that agreed, colleagues? Thank you. 9B, this is to be deferred until January, pending completion of interviews. So we will bring that back to you, colleagues, in January. Item 10, motion to support the work of Remembering Srebrenica. This is a report to be presented by Councillor David Jones, and as I said at the beginning, David is on his way to join us this morning, so I will defer this item, I think, until David arrives, if colleagues are comfortable with that. Likewise, item 11, GM School Readiness Programme update. Again, I will hold that until David arrives, if colleagues agree with that. So, item 12, Metrolink fares and ticketing. Colleagues will have a report setting out our proposals for Metrolink ticketing from early 2020. And leaders will recall a discussion that we had whereby we were seeking to minimise as far as we can the increase with regard to the pressure that people are still under, and also recognising that there's going to be quite a lot of change on Metrolink come the new year with the opening of the Trafford Park line. We've had an update on the delivery of the new trams, which is slightly delayed. So there's a whole set of issues around Metrolink, which will make it another big year, but nevertheless with potentially not fully where people might have expected it to be. So we've taken all of that on board in proposing, as far as we can, an inflation or just below inflation increase across Metrolink for the next calendar year. On a weighted average, this is 2.2% across all ticket types. However, I think it's important that I point out that it won't mean that every single ticket will be affected in this way, and a small number of tickets, particularly single tickets in Zone 1 on Metrolink, will see a higher increase. That is because Metrolink ticketing is done in units of 10 pence, and the only increase that we could apply to those tickets would take it beyond the 2.2%. However, as I was saying at the beginning, we are doing our best to try and bring through more options for people so that they can get the best possible value from Metrolink. This time last year actually, we ran a pilot called Early Bird when we were giving people the option of a much cheaper ticket. I think it was a £1 ticket at the time, if they were prepared to travel much earlier in the morning, thereby avoiding the morning peak. Evaluation of the pilot showed that it was a popular option. There was strong public support for it. So as part of this package, we're proposing to bring back an early bird scheme that will start from early in the new year. This will be available on contactless payment and would mean that customers touching in before 7 a.m. Effectively would be charged the reduced off-peak tariff rather than the peak travel card fare. So that is quite a significant saving for people. Mayor Bennett has raised concerns about whether or not it could be extended to cash customers, and that's something that we will ask TFGM to investigate, but it is an important point. Alongside the early bird product, we're also bringing in another ticket offer, which is intended to support people who work part-time or have irregular working arrangements. And this is effectively a pack of 10 one-day travel cards that people can use according to their convenience, rather than a weekly or a monthly that people may be familiar with. For those who are kind of struggling to understand what a Carnet card is, we're told to tell you that this is the modern equivalent of the Clipper card, which for those of you of a certain vintage in Greater Manchester, you will have very fond memories of, I'm sure, as do I. So the Carnet system is intended to give people that flexibility, and again, will be a lower price offer for those who can afford it. Again, a concern about whether or not the 28-day limit might again be something that's an unnecessary restriction, again raised by Mayor Bennett, and we will take that point on board as well and see if we can come back with a an even better offer for you, Mayor Bennett, than we've already put forward. So, colleagues, that's a run through the issues for Metrolink ticketing. Alongside all of this, we are also reviewing security on Metrolink, and I don't know whether the Deputy Mayor might want to just say something briefly about the recent launch of the new travel safe unit in partnership with Greater Manchester Police.
Thank you, Mayor. I would actually like to just take this opportunity on the back of this report to point out to members that the new transport unit has been launched now. It's up and running. New transport unit from the Greater Manchester Police, and that was part of the measures we put forward to fund additional policing from the precept increase for this year's budget. So this new unit, which will effectively replace the PCSOs who were on the trams, those PCSOs have been redeployed into communities, and we have employed 50 warranted officers now to provide this new transport unit for across the transport network on the trams and also roads. I think members here will be all too well aware that we found when there were some issues on the trams last year that because PCSOs didn't have the same level of powers as warranted officers, what they could do in terms of enforcement was constrained. That constraint has now been removed. We've got 50 warranted officers in a new dedicated team across the city region on the network, and that they'll work very closely with the wider Travel Safe partnership. In the 4 or 5 days it's been up and running, there's already been a very significant number of arrests and interventions both on the trams and on the roads. So we're hoping that the members of the public will see this greater visibility and feel the benefit in terms of increased safety and security on the network.
I'm sure they will, and thank you very much indeed, Bev. So, a package of improvements on Metrolink, and as well, of course, with the opening of the Trafford Park line, I think 2020 will be a very significant year for the system. We're asking you today to approve the fare package that I've taken you through, but to delegate the precise implementation date, the decision around that, to myself and to the Chief Executive Officer. So if colleagues are content with that, thank you very much. Moving on to item 13, Greater Manchester Electric Vehicle Charging Tariff Proposal. I'm going to invite Eamon to present the report to you, but I will then come back to the issues raised by the Scrutiny Committee to make sure that they are on the record. So, Eamon.
Thank you, Mayor. The report before you sets out proposals for the introduction of a tariff proposal to coincide with the replacement of a significant number of existing charging points which have reached a point of obsolescence with more up-to-date facilities across the city. This is not the full-scale rollout that we anticipate being able to undertake as part of our clean air plan, but this is the extent to which we are able to go given the money that we have available from government at the moment. As the Mayor has said, this was the subject of extensive discussion at the GM Scrutiny Committee, and the report has been amended to reflect some of the comments that were made there, in particular the need for us to ensure there is an effective and appropriate membership scheme, and also that we examine the level of charging for overstaying to make it more consistent with market norms. But the report is before you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Eamon. So just to add to that, members of the Scrutiny Committee queried some of the market research that was undertaken to develop the structure, but I think the proposals you have before you are very much in line with charging schemes that have been introduced in other UK cities, and not necessarily out with any of those proposals. There was a concern raised about the charging regime potentially being detrimental to the growth of the electric vehicle market, and that was taken on board when this was, it's a very fair point, but it was taken on board. Comments made by the taxi community to the committee also taken on board with regard to ensuring all charging points are in working order. There's a range of other concerns, and I think you'll see, colleagues, in the report that they've been set out. What we don't believe we can agree to is the delay to the introduction of the scheme and the linkage to the Clean Air Plan. We just feel that Greater Manchester needs to get on with implementing a scheme, and that it's funded in the way we describe, so that we can not just renew the existing points that we have, but we can start to expand this network and make it a part of what we do, and yes, establish the principle that in future electric vehicle will be charged for, but obviously much cheaper than petrol or diesel. Councillor Alan Brett.
Well, I think we're still the only authority that's got an electoral mayor's car, but can I just refer to 3.4? And I think we need to get a proper definition, what's rapid and what's fast. I wrote it down recently because I just assumed that the commercial ones all did them in a time. But I think, I can't remember which is which. Is the fast ones does them in about 10 to 15 minutes and the rapid take there. But I do think if we're going to be making these county-wide and everything else, we need to let the public know what this actually means, and why we've got two words that to many people mean the same thing. I think he's confusing. I see Simon's nodding away here, so perhaps he'll give a definition. But I think this is important. I'm fully in favour of this, and I think which comes first, the infrastructure or people buying the cars? I think you've got to get the infrastructure in so that they will buy the cars and the other vehicles.
Just to clarify, Chair, and I think Councillor Brett raises a very important point, that the terms are used within the supplier market. I think as we bring the new system now forward on the streets, we should look at appropriate terms that users might more readily recognise. The fastest of the two is the rapid charger, and the rapid charger on some vehicles will deliver up to an 80% level of charge within 40 minutes on a vehicle. Fast chargers are typically a charger that you would expect to leave a vehicle on in a car park for a medium stay period and then return with your vehicle charged. And I think the point's very well made that we could brand them far better than to use the two terms that are in the report at present.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Simon. Councillor Brenda Warrington.
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly welcome this report, Chair, but I do want to make the point that I fully agree with the statement you made a few minutes ago, that charging for these new rapid or fast chargers that are going to be installed, it's essential that we do that really as they are installed. And I agree, we cannot wait for the Clean Air Plan. We don't know how long that might be before it can be introduced. Because I think if something is made available free of charge, then it becomes very, very difficult at a future date to then introduce a charge. It would be very difficult. And I do believe that the charging regime would still be considerably cheaper than purchasing petrol or diesel. So I fully agree that we should charge from the beginning of the installation being done. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Brenda. No further comments, colleagues? Just to reiterate what Eamon said, there is a proposal on the back of the Scrutiny Committee's recommendation to establish a membership scheme, which would mean that all of the charges set out would be subject to a reduction for people who decide to join that scheme, and we'll obviously try and make sure that that's as available and accessible to all people as much as possible. But I do think Brenda's point is right. We are now having to look at serious change across our transport system with regard to decarbonisation. And we are, of course, looking at a clean air zone, and that raises challenging financial implications for Greater Manchester. This is about establishing a new principle, and I think we are only following what other cities are doing. That there has been free electric vehicle charging, but I don't think anybody would expect free petrol, and therefore I don't think anybody in the long run can expect free electric for their car. So, colleagues, the proposals are set out. I think this is something we need to get on and do. And if you're content to agree those recommendations, thank you very much. Item 14, Mayor's Cycling and Walking Challenge Fund. So this is an update on the programme, noting the progress that we've made on the first 5 tranches in the delivery of the B network, and asking your approval for the 6th tranche to be granted programme entry into the scheme. You will see the major and minor schemes that we have underway set out in the note, and the progress being made on those schemes, with a good spread right across Greater Manchester, incidentally. Paragraph 3.5 then gives you the recommendations with regard to programme entry for the next tranche. And of these schemes, 18 are minor, but 7 are considered major schemes that will require more than £5 million of funding. Taken together, this means now that the programme is, in fact, it significantly exceeds the £160 million that we allocated to the development of the B network. But our Cycling and Walking Commissioner, Chris Boardman, was very clear that he felt we needed to develop a pipeline of schemes so that there is no disruption to the delivery of the system, and that will strengthen our position with regard to government in asking for further funding to continue to build it out. It's a very impressive piece of work, actually, from Chris and the team at TFGM to put us in this position. I think we're in a very strong position and on the cusp of real change, actually, with regard to cycling and walking across Greater Manchester, because many of these schemes will start to be built in the new year, and people will begin to see changes in their communities. So we're in an extremely strong position. When you put it alongside the item we were just discussing, electric vehicle charging, I think we can begin credibly now to say that we are rising to the climate challenge, as well, of course, as promoting higher rates of physical activity amongst our population. And it is my intention, alongside the plans we have for the integrated R network, to promote cycling and walking as the first mile and the last mile in an integrated system. So when we bring through the bike hire scheme, which also will land next year, we very much promote that as the way in which people might take their first journey via bike, to then pick up a bus in a reformed system, and then a tram, and all of it being within an integrated ticketing approach. So this is really important. We're in a very strong position, and I would ask colleagues to endorse the recommendations as set out at the front. Thank you very much. Item 16, GM Housing Investment Loans Fund. Oh, 15, my apologies. Item 15, GM Growth Deal, Salford Bolton Network Improvement. Can I ask Eamon to introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. This report seeks approval for the allocation of previously earmarked funding for the latest phase of the development of the Salford and Bolton Network Improvement scheme. The work is underway, and this additional funding is needed to take it forward to the next stage. So I ask for your endorsement.
Is that agreed? Thank you very much, colleagues. Item 16, GM Housing Investment Loans Fund. Rochdale Riverside Phase 2. Can I ask Mayor Bennett to introduce this?
Thank you, Mayor Burnham. So the combined authority is being asked to note the current position in regards to Rochdale Riverside Phase 2, which is a mixed-use development here in the town centre of Rochdale. You'll note from the report that the CA is being asked to commit up to £4 million into this, which is on a 50-50 basis with the council here in Rochdale. This is encompassing residential, office, hotel use, but I guess for our concern is the 228 apartments across 3 buildings. There's also going to be green space, cycling and low carbon building design and materials at the heart of this regeneration initiative, which builds on the regeneration that we're already seeing around us at the moment, which is part of a 250 million regeneration plan for the town centre here in Rochdale. In a sense, this is us responding, or it's Rochdale responding to your call for a town centre challenge, which is about bringing more residential living into town centres, mitigating the impact on the need to release green belt and greenland within Greater Manchester, whilst also enabling us to meet our local housing need within Greater Manchester. On top of that, obviously, if we increase density within places like Rochdale, we also improve how the retail offer and functions here within the town centre as well. So this is here for recommendation. There is scheduled to be a further approval, so there will be another report brought to the CA at a later date for approval once we've done some further due diligence work on the proposals. But this is here for approval in principle. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mayor Bennett. This is I think a very important investment to support what Paul said, our vision for revived town centres across Greater Manchester, particularly as new residential locations. And obviously we've got the Stockport Mayoral Development Corporation and the great progress that's been made there. And it's really pleasing to see Rochdale coming through now with, well, we can see the change already in the town centre, but this scheme, alongside others that I believe the council has in development, will, I think, really start to change things alongside improvements to public transport. And we're also in discussions about better integration of ticketing between rail and the Metrolink system. So I think this is an important recommendation. I can see Oldham asking to comment, which is a little worrying in the context of an Oldham and Rochdale rivalry. But I'll give the floor to Councillor Sean Fielding.
Thanks, Chair, and I will be nice to Rochdale because I'm very fond of Councillor Brett. I commend Rochdale's ambition for the redevelopment that we can see. When I got off the bus this morning, I can see it happening right next to the tram stop, and it's very positive that it incorporates so much residential accommodation. Oldham faces similar challenges around viability for residential developments in the town centre, but we have similar ambitions to see a significant amount of redevelopment in Oldham town centre to change the focus of what the town centre is about to more leisure opportunities, and also to increase the number of residential properties in Oldham. We've got an ambition for in excess of 2,000 residential properties in Oldham town centre, but because of those viability challenges, there will be intervention that is necessary to be able to deliver on those. And it's very positive that we see this approach being taken in Rochdale to make that a reality. And I hope that with the support of the CA and with us, of course, putting some of our own money in, we're able to increase the proportion of residential properties in Oldham town centre, so that when we look again at the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, we will be able to reduce the pressure on the green belt, which is what many of our residents are calling for. But this is a very positive story for Rochdale, but I'm really pleased about the implications that it has for my own borough also. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much indeed, Sean, and your spending bid has been duly noted. Councillor David Greenhouse.
As this is turning into an expression of interest, can I put ourselves on record as well that we too are building in the region of 4,000 new residential units in the town centre over 5 intervention areas. So we'd definitely be pleased to follow Rochdale's example because there are serious, proposals going ahead that need significant underwriting and support. So we'd be glad of this precedent being set and look to formal discussions taking place sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, David. I think the bidding war is well underway here now, and I should say the plans for Bolton Town Centre are equally ambitious as those we see in our other towns. I've got Councillor Warrington, I think, and Councillor Brett both indicating, and I'll bring Mayor Bennett back in as well at the end. So, Brenda? I thought I saw you indicate. So, Councillor Brett?
Yeah, can I thank Sean for those kind words, and we all know that where Rochdale lead, Oldham follow. On a brighter note, early in the new year, Countryside Properties, which are developing 4 sites near the town centre, will be delivering 300 plus houses to rent roughly at the same time. So we are delivering lots of property there. You mentioned integrated transport, and I think when the Transport for Greater Manchester is looking at these things, if I get it right, if you arrive at a Manchester city, in the city centre at either Victoria or Piccadilly, you can then use your train ticket to cross the city centre. I'd like to think if you arrived at Rochdale railway station, you could use your railway ticket to come down the hill to here. Just a suggestion, all right? And as of course, if you want to improve the transport in Greater Manchester, can you double up the number of units? You knew I was going to say it, Eamon, all right? The problem is, at peak hours, once you get beyond Newey and get into the borough of Oldham, is finding a seat, and in parts, they just stand back and wait. I'm not going to ask for a 6-minute service, I just want double units.
I've just been conferring with Eamon, and I think the point is accepted around the lack of integration between rail ticketing and Metrolink ticketing. It's actually quite a serious point, and if we're going to support town centre living, I think it's these kind of issues that can make a difference. So it's not always happened at CA, but I will confirm, Councillor Brett, that we will launch a pilot on this to see if we can see what effect it has on the wider system. Now, there is a concern about precedent and where else might then, and how affordable that might be, but I think there is an issue here around supporting what's happening in Rochdale Town Centre and getting a public transport offer to back it. So I think, subject to a proposal coming back to this CA, I think we will look at a pilot on an integrated ticketing offer between rail and Metrolink. Mayor Bennett.
Just on this, the precedent has already been set, and it was set in Stockport, where we put in £2 million worth of patient equity to support the regeneration of Stockport. So I just wanted to be clear on that. I guess what I wanted to say, though, is we're looking at the Housing Investment Loans Fund here. We know across Greater Manchester, certainly in some of our town centres, we've got some really big viability challenges, and colleagues within the room will know some of our bids to the Housing Infrastructure Fund have got through to the second round. We're still awaiting government to give us, hopefully, the green light on all of those. And obviously, we've been successful more recently with things like marginal viability funds into government as well. But I just want to put a marker down. Obviously, alongside the spatial framework, the draft spatial framework, we published the infrastructure framework. And obviously, moving forward, this is going to be a continual issue, how we actually leverage in investment into Greater Manchester to do more of this, because ultimately our infrastructure requirements will never be met by the Housing Infrastructure Loans Fund. There's nowhere near enough cash within that loans fund to actually meet our infrastructure requirements moving forward. And obviously, we know there are some structural challenges in terms of how the government's Green Book appraisal works and the benefit-cost ratio, which seems to skew money into London and the south. So all of this is very much part of a conversation I suspect we'll be having with government in the new year. But it's great to see this happening, and it's great to see districts prioritising town centre regeneration as per the Mayor's challenge. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. I genuinely couldn't agree more. And what's interesting is actually that there's a market interest in all of our towns. and we saw that clearly in Stockport, but it's coming through in Bolton, it's coming through in Rochdale, it will come through in Oldham, Sean, and we will be supporting your ambitions for Oldham town centre as well. Network Rail are often a big part of this, and we are seeing more cooperation, I think it's fair to say, from Network Rail with regard to some of the sites that they own. What I would like to do is have an update on the town centre challenge early in the new year to see where we're all up to. I think it's important because you mentioned funding, Paul, and the funding that we have available in the Housing Investment Loans Fund. That isn't adequate to meet all of our ambitions, as you rightly say, but if we have got well thought through plans that can show delivery is a real possibility, we will then of course be in a better position to bid to the Stronger Towns Fund and get that wider investment in infrastructure that you rightly say is needed. So I think it's about credibility and delivery that maybe other areas can't deliver, can't produce, but we increasingly can, it would seem. So I think this is a developing success story. So colleagues, if you are content to note the current position on Rochdale Riverside Phase 2 and approve in principle this investment of up to 4 million for the Phase 2 mixed-use development, but that, as Paul said, will be subject to a full approval at the Combined Authority in due course. Is that approved, colleagues? Thank you. Item 17, GM Investment Framework Project Update. I'm going to invite Councillor Molyneux to speak to this item. If colleagues have any concerns relating to the Part B item, I'm hoping you don't actually, so that we can take this item as one now. Councillor Molyneux.
Thank you for that, Andy. Pleasure in moving report. It shows once again the support that we are giving as a combined authority to businesses in GM. 4 significant loans that both help to create and retain employment opportunities for our residents, and I'm happy to move the report.
Thank you very much indeed, David. Councillor Warrington.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to support the report. I just wondered whether you could advise whether the companies mentioned in the report have signed up to the Good Employment Charter. I understand that it's previously been suggested that companies that we invest in would be asked to do this. So can you tell me whether this was discussed and have they agreed?
I'd have to come back to you on that, Brenda, because the charter is still in development. We had an event yesterday at the Mechanics Institute where we were agreeing the criteria, or working with trade unions and other colleagues to look at the detailed criteria for what will be membership of the Good Employment Charter. So we've had lots of expressions of interest as supporters at the moment. What we want to do in the new year is move towards a clear criteria for membership of the Charter. And it's at that point, effectively, that it will be formally launched. I think as a working principle, that is exactly what we should be doing. Whether it's happened in the case of these companies, possibly not, because of the Charter not being fully signed off with regard to the detailed criteria. But I can take that on board and provide you with a more detailed reply, if that. But it's a fair point. Okay, colleagues, unless there's any further points on that, we're approving the funding applications and agreeing to delegate authority to the Gmca Treasurer and Monitoring Officer and delegating authority for the period 30th November to 30th of January. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. So that would conclude the agenda, other than the items that we deferred earlier. And unfortunately, Councillor Jones has not been able to join us this morning. So I think I will first ask Chief Executive of Bury Council to introduce the item on school readiness, if that's okay.
Thank you, Mayor. This report does 2 things. Firstly, it recommends that the Combined Authority allocate investment of £250,000 from the Reform Investment Fund for a new digital platform giving frontline staff access to the best evidence-based interventions for 0 to 5-year-olds who need extra support with their development. And importantly, the digital platform will also give parents access to the best advice as well. And this is exactly the sort of innovation our Reform Investment Fund was designed for, and it's recommended that the CA approve the funding, with the commercial details being delegated to the Combined Authority Treasurer. The second thing the report does is to give an update on our performance across Greater Manchester on improving the proportion of our children whose development means that they are ready for school. Overall, there is still a gap between Greater Manchester performance and national average levels. However, individual districts are making really good progress, and the details of that are set out in the report. And also across Greater Manchester, we have now closed the gap for children between national levels and Greater Manchester levels for those children who are eligible for free school meals. So there is some evidence that we are having an impact on those who most need additional support. However, there's still a lot more needed to be done to close the gap for all of our children, and this investment recommended in this report will help with that gap closing. So very happy to answer questions, Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed, Jeff. Some real progress being made, and we're grateful to you and all the colleagues who are part of that. Anybody want to come in on this item? If not, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Just to say that I welcome the report, and just want to pick up on the essential parenting as an online resource providing expert-led, evidence-based parental advice, and the initiatives around actually what we can do when we invest in early years, and how digital can play a part in that. I'm also really goes to show, I think, that when we invest in early years, we can really make a difference at a large scale, a large scale change, and at pace, which is what our aspirations are around and our ambition. So I fully support this report.
Thanks very much indeed. Councillor Warrington.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at section 4.3, and it references that principled agreement has been made by the GM Directors of Public Health. Can you tell me whether the Directors of Children's Services have also been involved in any of the discussions or consulted in any way? And also on the same section, reference to savings across the early years system. Do we know what the estimated ongoing costs to individual local authorities might be? And which budgets are going to support this? Where's it coming from? Thank you.
Thanks, Brendan. Important questions. Jeff?
Thank you, Mayor. So this report has been approved by the Children's Board, and before that it went to the Director of Children's Services for Greater Manchester. So yes, they have been fully involved in developing these proposals. The financial implications, if the pilot shows this to work, would, it is proposed, be picked up in an ongoing sense by public health budgets across the 10 districts. But that is subject to evaluation to show whether the online support does lead to a further improvement in school readiness. But the Director of Public Health have said that they will, subject to that evidence being provided, look at picking up the ongoing revenue costs to maintain these systems going forwards.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Any other colleagues want to come in on this item? If not, can I ask for your agreement to the recommendations? Thank you. Okay, final item is the item on remembering Srebrenica. And I'm very pleased to welcome Yusuf Tai, who's a trustee of the Remembering Srebrenica charity. Colleagues will be aware that this year is the 24th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which saw over 8,000 Muslim men and boys killed by Serbian nationalist forces. And there's been a move across Europe to recognise the significance of the 11th of July as the day on which this appalling atrocity took place, and use it as a day across Europe to develop educational and cultural programmes to promote an awareness of the causes of such atrocities and nurture peace and human rights. And I think the moment that we're living through means this is something that is very, very much needed at this particular moment in time. I attended the service at Manchester Cathedral representing Greater Manchester earlier this year, and I can just say how moving it was. I think it was also quite moving when England played in the region recently, and the response from the people was quite something. So our role in liberating the people of the region, I think, is something that also needs to be remembered with pride. So what we're being asked to do here is to offer support to remembering Srebrenica delegates from Greater Manchester who've been working to make sure the lessons of this genocide are understood across Greater Manchester, to support memorial events in July throughout Greater Manchester as part of the Remembering Srebrenica Week, support the work of the organisation in communities across Greater Manchester to tackle hatred, hate crime, and promote equality and a more cohesive society, and support the work of our schools to bring the lessons of Srebrenica to young people across Greater Manchester. So, colleagues, can I ask for your support for, I think, a programme of work that we all would agree is much needed at this moment in time, and agree that from the 25th anniversary next year that there will be a series of work across our 10 boroughs supporting the Remembering Srebrenica organisation. Is that agreed, colleagues? Thank you very much. I did say it was the last item, but I actually have another item just to close today's meeting, and he's already been described as the longest goodbye in local government history, but we're going to prolong it just by Councillor Brett, I have to say that was, because we announced his departure, I think, at the CA last December. So it certainly has been a long one. We've been squeezing every last bit of value out of him, as he probably would support, I would imagine. But we just didn't want to let this meeting go by without paying tribute to our treasurer, and before that, the City Council's treasurer. Richard has had a long and distinguished career in local government, and has given huge service to the people of Greater Manchester. Didn't always work here. 7 years as treasurer of Northamptonshire County Council. Is that the one that went bust?
It is.
Or is that, yeah?
Spectacularly.
He got out of there in good time, and joined Manchester City Council as treasurer in 1999, in time to work on the 2002 Commonwealth Games. Was that to budget, Eamon? Or?
Absolutely.
Okay, it's getting better this CV. April 2011 became the first treasurer of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and in both of his roles, heavily involved in negotiating with the government on devolution, including the City Deal Earn-Back Agreement and the business rates pilot. Participated in the acquisition of Stansted Airport by Manchester Airport Group. A board member of Transport for Greater Manchester on their audit committee. Trustee and chair of finance for the Education and Learning Trust. Member of the audit committee for the growth company Manchester Metropolitan University. The list goes on, and as you'll see, just absolutely outstanding service to all of those organisations, and I have to say to me as well, with some of the demands that I've brought to Richard in my new role around the RPAS and our work on rough sleeping and other things that we're seeking to achieve. I found him to be somebody who tries to say yes rather than no, which is a wonderful quality to have in a treasurer. So I'm sure colleagues, I don't know if any colleagues do want to make some of their own tributes, and I would welcome it if they did. But on everyone's behalf, we have a small token, Richard, of our appreciation for everything that you've done, the wisdom with which you've guided our financial considerations. As you can see, it's quite a small token, and there is also something else where the leaders want to send you on a basic accountancy course, as well as something you might consider in your retirement. That I think we already know you're an expert in creative accounting, and we're very grateful to you for that. But before I do present this to you, I think I should invite Sir Richard Lees to speak.
Glad I managed to get back in the room in time for this, because I thought it was never going to happen. First of all, Richard, can you make sure we know where all your back pockets are before you leave, please? No. I've had the pleasure of working with Richard over 20 years now, both at the City Council and at the Combined Authority. I think has done a remarkably professional job throughout that period of time, given the problems we've had to face. The fact that, again, from a City Council point of view, that we are still, our finances are still, notwithstanding austerity, are in reasonably good order, really comes down to the stewardship that Richard showed, and his ability to say to both leaders and chief executives no on a regular basis. Really important skill for a treasurer, but he has steered us through very, very difficult times, including the setting up of the Combined Authority. Wish you all the best for the future, but a really, really big thank you for all you've done for us over the over 2 decades.
Well said, Richard. So, if I could do the honours on behalf of everybody, we will be frisking those back pockets on the way out of the building today. But you've really, it's an outstanding record of service, Richard. We're all deeply grateful to you. Greater Manchester today is in a very strong position. You've left us in very, very good shape indeed. We're all grateful to you, and we will miss you very much indeed. So, thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much. It's been a great 20 years, to be honest, and Northamptonshire was still solvent when I left, but what the Mayor didn't say, and what you perhaps need to worry about, is that earlier in my career I worked for a certain South Yorkshire Metropolitan County Council, which went on to spectacular abolition, and followed that at Humberside County Council, which equally had a spectacular abolition. Both after I'd left, about 3 or 4 years after I'd left, they were all abolished. So perhaps somewhere along the way, 3.5 years since I left Manchester, so I think Richard needs to be slightly worried. The other piece of the jigsaw that some of you will know is actually that I'm a Mancunian. Born in Manchester, grew up in my very early childhood before we moved away, and part of the reason why we moved away was the quality of the air in Manchester. So in the 50s, most of you won't know, some of you will know about Manchester. Government finance, so it's been a long journey. Person, so